This is Vam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Jeff Patterson. You're the founder of the Northwest Fighting Arts Portland Tai Chi Academy, right? Did I get that
Y-
right?
Yes, sir.
And we're going to talk about a couple of things today, but we always like to get into your story. So we're going to talk about these topics: transformative power, meditation techniques for everyday life, and the yielding warrior. But before we get to that, a couple of questions you ask of any guest. Like, what motivates you, and why do you do what you do?
I've been very fortunate to have a passion about my career and what I've done for many, many years. And I've been running my academy now for 30 years. I've been studying the martial arts for 36 years. And it's something that I would do even if it wasn't my profession. And so I've been very fortunate in that aspect. Um, one of the things that continues to drive my passion for it is through the years, I've had over 26,000 students come through my academy, and I've heard hundreds of stories about how the meditative arts has positively influenced people's lives. And that's one of the reasons that, really motivated me to write my last couple books and create my online program and my teacher training program is just to try to get this message out there and help as many people as we can.
Yeah, to kind of pay it forward because if you found that it helped you. Maybe you can tell your story. How did you find out about the transformative power of meditation? Like, what brought you to it?
So I was introduced to meditation at a fairly young age. At the time, I was very much into Western boxing. And I used to go to a boxing gym just a few blocks down the street here from my academy. And at a boxing gym, if you're not familiar with how they're run, it's not like your traditional fitness style class where you come in and there's a teacher leading a group of students. Usually in a boxing gym, you might see four or five coaches rolling around, and each one of those coaches might have a handful of fighters that they're working with. Well, at this one particular gym, one of the coaches that was there was a very well-known coach, and he had created very high-level champions in both amateur and the professional arena. And I really wanted to get to spend some time with him. So I would always show up at the gym when I knew he was going to be there. I'd work hard, try to get him to notice me. And after following him around for about 3 or 4 months, he finally started giving me some tips and showing me a few things. And it was only maybe 2 or 3 weeks of getting to spend some time with him when he said something to me that changed my life forever. And that he said, if you really want to be a good boxer, you should start doing meditation and Tai Chi. Now, at the time, I was this young 19-year-old kid thinking Tai Chi was for old people in the park. How's that going to help me be a better fighter? But I had a lot of respect for him and I followed his advice. And not only has it changed my life in many ways, through the years, I've seen it influence many of my students. And so that was how I originally got introduced to it.
So, is there like an Eastern versus Western mindset to get into meditation? You find some people that even today, you talk to people, they just can't get themselves into a meditative state. It just doesn't seem to be for them. At least at the point when you're asking them, they say they can't find a way to get to it. So was there it doesn't seem like you had as much of a wall even though you were young.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because that's a common misconception a lot of people have is that, through the years, I've heard hundreds of people tell me, I've tried meditation, but I just can't quiet my mind. It's not for me. And somewhere along the way, people got this misguided idea that in order to be successful with a meditation practice, you have to reach this state of nirvana where nothing bothers you and be in this blissful place. And, it couldn't be further from the truth. I've been very fortunate through my life to travel around the world and train with some amazing meditation practitioners. And I've never once met anybody who doesn't get distracted. We're all human, we all get distracted, and that's just kind of the way of the game. But when you understand how to play meditation and do the practice, you'll see that, every time you recognize one of these disturbances or imbalances when you're meditating, you use your posture, your breath, your movement to help bring you back to focus. And now, say maybe you've been meditating for 20 minutes and you get distracted 50 times. You just got 50 repetitions on how to be off center and bring yourself back to focus. And if you do that every day, every month, every year, you start to develop this power and this ability to that no matter what happens, you're able to come back to center and find that focus. And that's one of the ways that, meditation can be so powerful.
That's kind of like being in the present moment, or the perfection trap. As I'm a musician, and a lot of times people will get to this point where they're like feel they have to be perfect. And what I find is like, you don't learn if it's perfect. You're like you have to go through that what we call, I don't even want to call them mistakes, you call them happy accidents. Like there's no bad any bad perceived bad note is actually an opportunity to, actually evolve the song. But if you've got a mindset where you think you got to start over all the time, then like you're never gonna be able to kind of roll with the punches and
Right.
kind of be able to, make it so the audience doesn't even know you made a mistake. It's
Yeah.
like that type of mindset. It's a different, way of thinking or even being.
Yeah. It's very powerful to just to be able to kind of go with the direction of the flow, and that's one of the reasons why so many athletes these days are being drawn to the meditative arts because it really helps them find that focus and that ability to be more present and make those in the moment kind of reactions that
Mhm.
really help things just come together a lot smoother.
Yeah, I was wondering 'cause, like, you see these athletes, and it's like you know that they practiced something like 10,000 hours. They got all the plays down, but, like, they can't imagine everything that can happen, so you gotta be able to think on your feet and be in the moment so that you don't just go cascade down a path that's not appropriate for the situation, situational awareness of what you're in.
Yes, and back 30 years ago when I first started doing meditation, a lot of people thought of it as this new age practice, this kind of really didn't have much science behind it or any kind of valid proof that it was very legit. And these days, there's thousands of professional athletes that are turning to the meditative arts. I don't know if you knew this, but when Phil Jackson was coaching the Chicago Bulls and the LA Lakers, he used to have his athletes practice Tai Chi and meditation to help improve their performance. And here you got some of the best basketball players in the world, like Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. They're out there practicing meditation to help them be performing better on the court, and so, and not only that, there's tons of scientific evidence now where they've been doing studies on meditation through Harvard Medical School and through a lot of very reputable places that have shown that these practices are very valid and there's a lot of benefits to be had from the meditative arts.
Well, there's a lot of history. I mean, there's a lot of history behind these practices. Like some of them, they go back. It seems like sometimes Western medicine might poo poo, or Western mindset poo poos things that were around longer than some of these modern practices where it's all kind of it's pill based or process based, or but it's not as much this idea of the kind of mindset and things you can do without taking a physical action or physical pill, that you can get into the space in your mind. Because a lot of times it's the mindset, whether or not you're gonna either win the day or win the moment, or it's like you just see something as like half full, or is it actually half empty. It's like how you perceive things, it is your mindset. So it just seems like that has a lot of value that I guess people are starting to appreciate. As you said, the Chicago Bulls, they seem to appreciate this different methodology.
Yeah, I think when people get into the meditative arts, they look at it oftentimes from a fairly narrow viewpoint, and that thinking that all meditation is the same. And in reality, there's a lot of different ways and different ideas behind the practice that can take you down different paths. So I've broken down meditation into kind of five categories. You have more of the athletic side or the performance side of the practice, the therapeutic side, which is good for longevity and working through injuries. You have the medical side of the practice, which all of Chinese medicine is based off of Qigong theory, which is a meditative art. Then you have the philosophical side of the practice and also the meditative side of the practice and spiritual side. And so when you start cultivating a practice with the meditative arts, you might follow one or a combination of a couple of these paths. And in doing that, you're going to have different rituals and different active practices and philosophical methods that you will incorporate into your practice to help you along that specific path. And so there really is, a pretty wide range of
Very
directions you
expansive.
can take it.
Sounds like it's very expansive, and it seems to be like a hybrid approach maybe. Like sometimes, I like to think of things as crossing lanes. Because a lot of people want to stay in the box or stay in their lane, but like when you get out, like outside of that type of narrow thinking, if you start to mix different things together, because you're an individual, you might have a certain need, and having one aspect of something when there's multiple, you know, like practices out there. There might be things that this certain mix works for some individual versus another individual. Is that what you're kind of pointing out?
Yeah, and it all kind of comes back to what why you're being drawn to the practice, because once you have an a direction of where you want to take it, then you'll incorporate different practices that kind of help you with that. And in the meditative arts, no matter what path you follow, whether you're doing a movement practice, a sitting meditation, standing meditation, breath work, any direction you may take, they all have these five underlying principles that I call the five regulations. And within these five regulations, they're the foundation of any meditation practice. And by understanding these, you will see that no matter what you do, it can affect any area of your life. And they are regulating the body, regulating the breath, regulating the mind, regulating the energy, and regulating the spirit. And briefly, I'll kind of touch on what all five of these are. So, regulating the body, which is the easiest one to understand, it's the idea that we're paying attention to our skeletal alignment and our muscular tension. So, say, for example, you're sitting in front of your computer for 3 or 4 hours and you start feeling lethargic and maybe your neck's getting tight and you're feeling very depleted. And then another time when maybe the most important person in your world walks in the room and your body perks up and you feel like you're on top of the world. Well, these two different energetic states we're in 100% control of all of the time. Now, on a little deeper level of regulating the body, it also consists of maintaining some kind of muscular structure in the body, maintaining flexibility, eating a healthy diet to improve our energy, and getting enough sleep. All of these things are kind of connected when we talk about regulating the body. And then we have regulating the breath. And regulating the breath is a very deep topic and something that you'll study for the rest of your life if you get into the meditative arts. And oftentimes, Qigong is referred to as the science of the breath because there's literally hundreds of different breathing strategies within the practice. And because of that, we broadly categorize things into yin methods and yang methods when we start talking about the breath. Yin methods are often deeper, more holistic style of meditations that help bring the energy inward. And an example of a yin breath would be if you've ever listened to somebody sleep, their natural breathing pattern is a longer inhale and a shorter exhale. And this is the body's natural way of bringing your conscious mind into your subconscious mind, which is where we are when we're sleeping and dreaming. This is great for helping to reduce stress, anxiety, for panic attacks, for boosting our creativity. There's lots of reasons why we would do this yin side of the breath. Then there's the yang side of the breath, which is more aggressive. And an example of this would be if you've ever had to push your car or you pick up something heavy, your natural instinct is to exhale and put tension in the breath and make that breath audible. This helps generate energy and power, which is expansive. And now, once we start understanding how to use the breath strategically, we can use it to control our physical, mental, and emotional states throughout the day. You know, everybody goes through the day with emotional ups and downs. Some people are like a roller coaster, others may be a little more balanced. But when you start recognizing these imbalances and see yourself starting to get excited, we can use the in breath to help bring you back down. And when you see yourself starting to feel depleted, we can use the yang side of the breath to help energize us and bring us back up. Now, the third regulation is regulating the mind. And this, as with the breath, is a very deep topic. And we already kind of touched on it a little bit when we talked about how when you get distracted in a meditation, recognizing that distraction and helping yourself come back to center. There's this story that I really enjoy about these two old monks, and they're walking down this dirt road after a huge rainstorm. There's mud puddles everywhere. They will come up to this huge mud puddle, and on the other side is this beautiful little girl, and she's standing there in a white dress and she's crying. And the older monk, he yells across the puddle and says, "Is everything okay? Can we help you?" And she says, "I need to be somewhere, but if I walk across this puddle, I'm going to get my dress all dirty." So the older monk, he rolls up his pant legs and he walks across the puddle and picks her up, puts her on his back, takes her to the other side, drops her down, and she's off on her way. Well, him and the younger monk are walking a couple miles down the road. And finally, the younger monk is just furious and he says, "You know, we're not supposed to touch girls, but you did back there at the puddle." And the older monk says, "You're still thinking about that girl? I left her back there at the puddle." And how many times in life do we have to get 2 miles down the muddy road before we realize we need to let that thing go? And
Mhm.
so understanding how to regulate the mind is an extremely important part of this training. And then the fourth regulation, regulating the energy, is a very deep topic as well. And this is something we could talk for hours about, but just briefly to describe it, it's the idea that once you've reached a competent level in regulating the body, the breath, and the mind, you now have the tools available to circulate the energy in the body, to lead it inward, to extend it outward, and to express it in different ways. And so this is a kind of an essential tool in understanding when you're developing a meditation practice. And then the fifth and final regulation is regulating the spirit, and this is very profound. A lot of meditation monks and qigong practitioners will spend their entire life's journey working towards that stage of enlightenment. But when you start to understand these basic underlying principles, you see that by cultivating this practice, it affects anything we do in life and can enhance it in many ways.
Well, it's very encompassing and it's very expansive. But I was wondering, like, there were in some of the write up I have on you, is the three types of meditation: the ritual, active, and philosophical, and the relation between the five regulations that we were just talking about.
Yeah, so ritual practices are a very essential part of any meditation practice. And when I say ritual, I mean a time where you set time aside every day where you're not looking at any screens, you're not watching videos, you're not listening to audios or a meditation app. You're just turning your focus inward. And it could be in a sitting meditation, it could be a movement practice like Tai Chi or Qigong, something where we're trying to pay attention and make a deeper connection with ourselves. A lot of times the meditative arts are referred to as the internal arts, and they're called the internal arts for a reason. I think a lot of people these days are getting distracted with, the millions of videos out there on YouTube and all of these meditation apps, and they think that, they're going to go get to some deep, profound levels of meditation looking at a video screen. And I couldn't stress enough that while these things may be helpful in learning things occasionally here and there, that's not where you want to take your ritual. You being a musician, I'm sure you can relate in that if every time a musician has to listen to somebody else play in order to play, how are they ever going to play from their soul?
Yeah,
And it's just like that with
it's
the
internal.
meditative arts. So and then we have active practices, which are ways that we can integrate these meditative ideas into everything we do. And they can be done in as little as 60 seconds or 2 minutes. And you can do them when you're standing in line at the grocery store or walking down the street. And they're just ways that we can maintain that level of awareness and sensitivity all day, every day, because it makes no sense to meditate every day if the rest of the day you're stressed and unfocused. And so these things help us start to live the lifestyle. And then lastly, we have philosophical methods, and these can be used both in our ritual practices as well as our active practices. And they're great towards opening up our peripheral vision and seeing things from different angles and being able to be a little bit more strategic in our thoughts and our life.
It seems it's a very encompassing, and I always use the term of expansive rather than being narrowly focused. That there's a lot of pillars, there's a lot of options, but it seems to be like a holistic concept. Is like it's not just one thing that you're gonna get into, and I think today we tend to be so into social media, and it'll be like, oh, like a 5 steps, or to watch this video, get in this program, and it's like somehow you're going to go from 0 to 100 because some influencer says that you can be like them. Where really you have to dive, like the Victorian poets always talked about the looking glass self. Like in the looking glass self, it means evolved. You have to look into you. You have to figure out where you are. And then you also have to understand like the muse, right, is outside of you. So there's stuff that's inside of you and the stuff that's outside of you. There's a world. And there's an interconnection between like the microcosm and the macrocosm. And that is not just one thing. There's multiple layers and different options. And there's always an opportunity to improve.
Yeah, in today's society, everybody gets so caught up in these distractions with their cell phone and advertisements and things that are they're being bombarded everywhere. It's almost like everybody's walking around with a mask, or with these walls up, trying to protect themselves and not really stay connected to who they are, because maybe they don't want to say something that offends somebody, or they don't want to maybe show somebody how they really feel. But what happens is you start wearing this mask so regularly that eventually you start looking at yourself in the mirror and you're still wearing that mask. In
Hmm.
the meditative arts, as much like music is a great tool as well, it allows you to kind of tap into your soul and really like be connected to who you are. And having something like that in your life where you can put those barriers down, take those masks off, and feel a little bit more connected to your true spirit, that's really invaluable.
Well, the permission structure as an artist is like we dive into the vulnerability of, you know, a lot of people look for what's going to make them safe. Artists tend to be willing to put themselves in places where you might be a little unsafe, right? From the fact that, like, if you go into that vulnerability, like, people could criticize that. You could get hurt by that. So there's a tendency not to want to do that, to put up a mask, to put up a wall. But when you get into the creative arts, it's like you try to, the secret sauce of what you're doing is to dive into that, is to like fully immerse yourself in it. Not to the point where you hurt yourself, but the point where you can actually, you know, really look at that looking glass self and look at the outside world and find the interconnections and have a voice that people actually see something in what you're doing or what you're presenting that they can understand. There's like becomes what I would say is like you're in tune. You get in tune with like the world, and then people can feel that vibration or that frequency, and they, like a law of attraction, they get drawn to you, or you get drawn to that. So that's the way, it's kind of where my mind is at. But it seems how similar is some of the things that what do you deal with all the time to what I've just said. But
Yeah, so I like how you said in tune, because I feel like a lot of connecting to the energy, in qigong, it's believed that there's the universal energy, the earth energy, and the human energy. And to tap into connecting to those different energy sources, you kind of have to be in tune. You have to be quiet enough to be able to listen, to be present. And in doing that, there's a lot of beauty that comes from that, because there's so much that we miss on a day-to-day basis because we're thinking about something that happened 10 minutes ago or yesterday, or thinking about the future. And when we can just sit back and go for a walk in the grass and feel the blades of grass on our bare feet, and notice the wind blowing through the trees, and just pay attention to those things that are happening before us,
In the
it al-
present.
it allows us to not let our emotions take control, and it allows us to stay connected and in tune, if you will, to everything around us.
Well, it's in the moment. Like a lot of times, musicians, we always we can get caught in a trap, like the perfection trap. And so, if you're a musician that's in the moment, like Herbie Hancock talked about this, he was playing with Miles Davis, and they were playing a piece, and he played the wrong chord. Miles, he thought Miles was going to kill him, but Miles just took it as an opportunity and actually changed the song to match his note. What he took, what he heard, he didn't try to stay on the plan of the original arrangement. He adjusted to what he heard, which is a typical behavior of like a fusion jazz musician. It's like, okay, I'm going to be in the now because it's an opportunity. And we have a structure, but we're not totally wedded to it. We can evolve it, we can change it. And it's not going to end the world. It actually might be better if we actually change it. And, a classical musician might have a different point of view. They look like they're going to look at that piece of Chopin. They got to play it very narrow to what's on the written page. Can't really go beyond it, can do some things with it, but can't really get out of it. Where I've always been more of the person that likes to be able to expand the notes.
Yeah. That reminds me, when you're talking about that, as the concept of yielding, which is, my last book, The Yielding Warrior. It's Yielding is an extremely amazing concept, and it's been used in the meditative and martial arts for many years. And I in my most recent book, I break it down into three categories. We have physical yielding, mental yielding, and emotional yielding. Physical yielding is the easiest one to understand. It's the idea that I push you, you push me, whoever's the bigger, stronger person with the most leverage eventually is going to push the other person over. But with yielding, instead of us trying to see who the bigger meathead is, when you push me, I get out of the way of that force. And now I can respond with less effort. So I'm not trying to butt heads with you and see if I'm bigger and stronger than you. Now, it's obvious how this is beneficial in any kind of athletics, because it doesn't matter what sport you play, you're going to come up against other athletes who are bigger, stronger than you. And so, in order to be good at physical yielding, a lot of things have to come into play. You need to be well rooted. The lower part of your body needs to be strong and flexible so you can change your central equilibrium. The body has to be relaxed, the breath has to be calm, and the mind has to be present. Now, while it may be a lifetime journey to really master these skills, from day one, by integrating meditation into your life, you start to see these things more clearly inside yourself. And this is where it starts to become very interesting, because not only do we start to see them more clearly in ourselves, but we also start to see them more clearly in other people. And this is where we move into what I call mental yielding. So, say, for example, you and I are having a conversation, and I say something that unsettles you, and I pick up on it right from that first sign of imbalance. It's a lot easier to adjust the conversation at this point and keep us in a harmonious place than if I'm not paying attention to that. And pretty soon I'm so far off track, you want to slap me upside the head. And so, learning how to use yielding in all of our interactions is extremely powerful. One, we're being more considerate, which is something that we could all do more of. And two, it allows us to be strategic and guide conversations to a positive outcome with the least amount of resistance. And this is great for relationships, for business, for sales, for negotiations, many different ways that we can apply this idea. Then the third pillar of yielding is emotional yielding. And emotional yielding is very much like mental yielding, but it's with our own interpersonal conflicts. So you think about, oftentimes something will happen, and we'll respond and we'll go down this path. And we might get an hour, a day, a week down that road and realize maybe that wasn't the best choice. But with yielding and our ability to sit back and be present and not let our emotions get involved, oftentimes we can make a more educated choice and save us a lot of heartache on the other side by being more present in this mindset. And so, a lot I've been explaining this idea of yielding now for many years. I've been running my academy here for 30 years. And one of the most common things I'll hear people say is, yielding makes a lot of sense. In fact, I use yielding all the time. Well, I would agree in that I think everybody does some degree of yielding all the time. However, it's kind of like, if you or I were to walk into a crime scene with a detective who's been on the job for 30 years, I guarantee you that person would see things about the series of events and the timeline that I know at least I would have no clue of. And the meditative arts helps us see things inside of ourselves and inside of other people that I truly believe most people will go through life and never have any clue of without this kind of practice in their life.
It seems like that, I don't know, it's like a social type of judo or in some ways, but like I think a lot of people try to win the conversation, right? They don't, a lot of times in terms of listening skills, like if I could break it down to outside of just a common kind of understanding, like people don't listen to each other. They're thinking about like how they're going to respond, right? And they're trying to like almost like win the conversation, like it's an
Yeah.
argument, rather than are inserting their own concept of what they're hearing without really listening to the whole story. So they get triggered by a couple phrases, and they've already made an assessment of what you're saying. They've already related it to something that happened to them. And then suddenly they're not really listening to what happened to you because they're already kind of prejudging it. And then they don't really hear you. And then if you don't hear somebody, there's a lot of room for conflict.
Yes. Yeah, and the something that I kind of think connects well with what you're saying there is that not only is it in the spoken word, but a lot of people, because they're not really present, they don't recognize the body language and the energetic expressions coming from their face and the tone of voice and all of these things that really are more valuable in communication than just the words that are spoken. And if all you're doing is just listening for your point to try to prove your point or to say what you want to say, you're really missing a lot of the beauty of what conversation has to offer.
Well, the nonverbal cues, actors, when you watch actors, especially I used to watch like silent films to actually look at what the actors could do with their facial expressions and their nonverbal capability. Every actor today still does that. There are tons of scenes where they're not saying anything. It's how they're looking at the camera, what they're doing with their body, what they're doing with their hands. And, when you start to really study film and really great actors and directors, they really dive into the nonverbal. There's a lot going on before anybody says any bit of dialogue. And I don't know how much people miss that from what you're saying because they just hear the words.
Yeah. And that's something that is so uh deep embedded in the tai chi practice because of this yielding concept. You learn to give and exchange energy with other people, and you get to the point where you can touch somebody as softly as, like, a quarter of an ounce, and start to feel their whole body movement. And when you can do that, your tactile listening skills are really enhanced, which helps you be present. And it's just one of the many ways, I mean, we see things, we hear things, we touch things, we feel things, we express them. And our ability to kind of fine tune all of these areas are all extremely important when we're communicating.
I can see how athletes could really benefit from your practice because if they can take those things, they have that situational awareness, and then they have the muscle memory from the 10,000 hours of training, but then they've got this mindset training, and then spiritual training and heart and soul, all the pillars you were talking about. That if you look at it, some people might just focus on one pillar or one foundational element, but it's like when you take in the whole, then you're stronger because you're more able to kind of handle what the world throws at you, right? Because the world throws at you variation. Like it's not always the same thing.
Yeah, and with athletes, it's it helps with their internal physical awareness, so how they um, connect and move. A lot of times you go to grab a glass of water and you think it's just you're picking your arm up and you're moving it out, you're picking it up off the shelf and you're bringing it to your mouth to take a drink. Well, in reality, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of different muscular connections and energetic connections that are coming through the entire body, through the torso, through the hand, and being expressed in what's happening. And by breaking down these movements in a meditation practice where you're paying attention to all of these little subtleties, it really helps expand that internal awareness. So whether you're doing something in athletics or something else, you start to be more like you're playing a symphony rather than playing a three-chord rock and roll song. You're really starting to be in tune more, and that is one of the things that make the movement practices so powerful as part of your meditation practice, is that while a lot of meditation focuses on the breath and the mind, which is very important and a pillar in the practice, having the body be part of that reality and being present in the body and being able to make those connections and understand how that circulation works in the body will get you to deeper states of meditation when you're doing still practices like sitting and breath work.
So mind, body, soul, connection and spirit
Yes.
connection. Because you could get into the spiritual too to be able to kind of pick up on like the unseen things or the energy. Like a lot of times musicians, we can pick up like the vibe. We'll say there's a vibe. Like you get with a bunch of guys or people, and there's all this nonverbal communication. And sometimes you get a group of people, they just come together and there's like they're just right. It's the right frequency. Everybody's in the right place. You don't have to say anything to the drummer. The drummer knows what to play. The bass player knows what to do. The vocalist knows what to do. And there's this like unseen, like uncommunicated feeling that people just like, oh, when I hear what you're putting down, I know what goes with it. I don't even have to talk about it. And when you run into people where you have to overly explain what you're doing, it's like, well, maybe we're not the right fit
Yeah.
compared to the group where the guys he just knows what to do. And like a lot of musicians, we've been in the kind of scenario where there's these there's these other musicians, they just get you. You don't have to say it. They just know it. And it's like, wow, it's like, how did we find each other? But that happens. And I think that happens in other places in life that can happen. And it really because you're not just listening to words and you listen to other things that are out there.
Yeah, one of my favorite angles of the meditative arts has always been the philosophical side of the practice. And it helps to expand your mind to see things in different angles, which kind of ties into the connection that you were just saying, in that, we'll do things whether they be through mantra or through sayings. One of my old meditation teachers, he had me memorize the Tao Te Ching, which is a book of 81 sayings that talks about life and virtue and how to apply things from different angles. And one of the things that I've always loved about that style of practice is that you'll see something, say, as a 25-year-old guy or girl, and you'll where you are in life and you'll feel like you understand it, and you'll work with it and you'll do this and you'll evolve, and a year later, 5 years later, you'll see it from a whole nother perspective, and you'll see these other things that come into play by doing that. With with these sayings, I like them because they're fairly vague sometimes in ways that they can be interpreted, like 30, 40, 50 different ways.
Mhm.
And you start to put different meanings to them and say, this can help me here or here. And I've always really enjoyed that part of the practice. And so, anytime you start to build a meditation practice, for those of you out there that are maybe coming new to the practice, or maybe you have one and it's just um, hasn't really reached any depth yet. There's three things that I like people to think about. And the first one is, why are you being drawn to a meditation practice? Do you want to stay healthier into your later years to watch your grandkids grow up? Or are you looking to deal with a stress disorder, or an athlete wanting to improve their performance? Whatever that is for you. And then when you have that why, think about how your life would change if you accomplish that. If you get to that point where you no longer have panic attacks, you can go to the grocery store and you feel good, or maybe you're 85 years old and you're able to go walk your dog and go for a walk with your grandkids, or whatever that is for you. And then also flip the coin and think about, if you don't do that, how is it negatively going to affect you? And how are all of the ways that are going to influence you because you didn't do this? Because we want this fuel, because in order to benefit from these meditative arts, we need to do this on a regular basis. You have to be consistent. And if you're
Mhm.
consistent, you develop this discipline and this integrity and this perseverance that not only affects you when you're doing your practice, but it bleeds over into everything else you do in life. And so we want to have this idea of the energy, the motivation behind why we do the practice, the understanding that it's something we need to do on a regular basis. The Dalai Lama once said that everybody should meditate for 20 minutes a day. Unless they're too busy, then they should meditate for an hour. And I love that saying, in that
Yeah.
everybody's got the time to do this. And then the third thing that you want to consider is, you need to find a guide. You need to find somebody that's going to help you navigate these waters, because it's a very deep practice. And as a musician, I mean, you can relate. I mean, imagine if you'd never picked up a guitar before and somebody says, here's a guitar, go play. You're going to be horrible. And
It's
it's the
work.
same thing with the meditative arts. You got to have somebody help point you in the direction. I mean, do you want to play jazz, or do you want to play rock and roll, or do you want to play classical? You got to understand, what are the characteristics of these different methods, and how will they bring you those benefits? And so having those three things and those understandings will really help you be more successful integrating meditation into your life.
Which is it's a lifelong thing, because a lot of times people, they, it's like diets and, 10 step, 12 step, what programs that people just they do it and then they fall off. Because what you got to do is like, well, my grandpa was a coal miner. It's like he was a coal miner. It's like, you got to show up, right? You got to do the job. That's a hard job, mine explosion. But he had to take care of 12 kids, so he had to just show up. He had to deal with it. And like, when you go and you have the dedication, it's like, I'm gonna feed my family. That's kind of
Yeah.
core, right? But there's other things like, I want to get better. I want to get the noise out. I want to get the tension out. I want to get the anxiety out. Right? It's usually not going to be something that's a quick fix that's going to do it. You have to have a lifelong, like, dedication to something that's going to you can do until you're not here. And it's kind of like, for music, to me, is something like, it just is it's cathartic. So I do it whether it's gonna be a hit or not. I just love to play because I find it's like my meditation, right? Just
Yeah.
sitting at a piano for 2 hours and just noodling helps me, because it somehow, I take what's in and what's out, and I get into a zone, and I feel better after I'm done. Now, whether anybody wants to hear what I did doesn't really matter. But, when you put it out in the world, then you find people that do want to hear it. So it's just, once you get into something that you're dedicated to it because you feel that it's going to help, that it's going to be something that you're not just going to drop. And I think we live in a world where, like, things just are, quick hit, a lot of noise coming in here. You get so many different people pitching things. How do you know which thing actually speaks to you? And I think that's where the depth of, like, you got to find your sensei, you find your teacher, find somebody that's actually gonna speak to where you are, right?
Yeah, I think a long time ago, I had a teacher once tell me that you want to create a life, not make a living. And, I think it's so important to find that passion, find that thing that resonates with you so you can sit there for 2 hours and play and it doesn't matter whether anybody hears you or not. It's one of those things where you can just be there. I have a morning ritual that I do every single day. I haven't missed one day since I had my hip surgery 5 years ago. And I don't care if anybody sees me do it. In fact, I'd rather they didn't. I'm out there doing it for myself. It's one of those times where I get to turn that focus inward and really kind of stay connected. And it's when you get to the point of something, when you're doing your meditation and you quit looking at it like it's a chore that you have to do every day, and it's something that you get to do, and you're like excited, like, this is giving me so many benefits. I get to go do my practice today. That changes the whole world right there. And that's where you really start reaping all the benefits and all the fruits from your practice.
It's like the need to breathe. If it becomes like as automatic as breathing, like it becomes something that you don't stress about, oh, I have to spend 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, 2 hours doing this, then you're probably not in the right mind space if you're actually stressed about doing it.
Right.
Right? It should be something that you look forward to, like me jumping on my Moog. It's like I just do it, whether, and I get lost in sound design. I get lost in creating waveforms, and I just want to hear newfound sounds. And I just get caught up in the whole idea of creating something from scratch. It's the creative buzz like an author gets from creating a world. And
Yeah.
I've talked to tons of authors, like they create these worlds. Like, why? Because they just feel the need to build these worlds, and it takes years to build the characters and build the structure, and they get just pulled into it, and if they have a need to do it because they're a creator, just in the creative kind of mindset, that's something they're probably not going to stop doing. It's work, takes a lot of dedication, but it's something that they feel that, like, they have to do, you know.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I feel like it does get to the point where it's almost a calling. It just becomes part of your nature, and when you can make it part of who you are, that's when I started to see, hundreds of students coming in here telling me that their lives are changing in multiple different ways because of the practice, because they started making it a way of life. And it's not until you make that realization and that connection that you really start to see all the benefits. And everything you do, by having that kind of root connection to who you are and staying really connected with the energetic expressions that we give, can be enhanced, whether it's playing music, playing sports, playing anything, your relationships, all of it can get better by doing a practice like this and staying more connected to yourself.
Are there some lessons learned over time that you've gotten into this practice, and now you've got, all this synergy with, your students around you benefiting, but are there lessons learned on the path to being where you are today that you could convey to the audience?
There's so many examples of people that have come in and has seen different changes in their practice or their lives because of this practice. You know, one of the things that I think about, there's many, we talked about the many different paths already. And so each one of those paths has a whole list of different benefits that come from the practice, and I've seen anything from people coming in here who are as stiff as 2x4s, and after a couple years of training, their whole physiology changes, and they're able to enjoy a relaxed life for here on out. And then other people that come in that turn to the practice and dive in because they're dealing with a stress disorder, they have panic attacks, or, they're dealing with severe amounts of depression, and they find a purpose in life to really let go of all those distractions and that worry and stay connected to who they truly are and find that peace within themselves. And so there's just really so many different things. I've seen athletes come in here from multiple different sports, from professional basketball, professional football, that come in here to improve their game, and seeing how it affects their focus and their timing and their ability to deal with the distractions. Because being an athlete, it's not just on the field, it's in your personal life. You've got
Mhm.
people coming up to you, and you've got all of these things that are happening. And so being able to deal with that and stay present and grounded, there's just so many different directions that people can pull from this practice.
It's a good point you made because people might come into it because they got a stressful work life or stressful personal life, right? Or a certain aspect of their life. And they're thinking, well, I'm just going to solve that part of my issue. But a lot of times when you get into something that's so expansive, it's going to have benefits across the board. And like if you're an athlete, like why might just help me on the field, but no, it helps you out off the field. So it's like your intention might like this is going to specifically help me on the field, but now you're finding it helps you like everywhere in your life, and so that becomes like a game changer to some people. I would think it's like, oh wow, it's like it doesn't just apply here; it applies there, here, everywhere.
Yeah, like I was saying earlier, how it makes no sense to be meditating once a day and then be stressed for the rest of the afternoon or the rest of the day. It's just like an athlete, if you think that they're going to be focused for 90 minutes of the game, and then the rest of their life is all distraction and unfocused, they're never going to be able to perform at their highest levels. And so with athletes, they need to learn how to live this in their day-to-day life. And the more focused they can be from the time they wake up till the time they go to bed, and in every action they do, that's where
Mhm.
they start to live it, and that's where they really start to get to those high levels of performance.
Yeah, 'cause I think we like to segment everything to like kind of try to plan everything out, but a lot of times it's like when you let go and then you let in, and then you start to like de-stress because a lot of times like I had worry about in my job is like I'm a software guy and I would worry about what's my next gig because I'm a consultant. But I just made the choice to be a consultant. So I have to like, once I said, you know what? I'm good at what I do and it's gonna happen. I'm gonna get the next gig. I'm not gonna worry about it. I'm just gonna be in the present, do the best I can do at what I'm doing. And then that will breed the ability to keep on working because I'm not gonna stress like what's gonna happen after this 6-month contract ends. What if I keep on worrying about that, then I'm gonna make something bad happen. So like I started to think in a different way, and then things just kept on happening, kept on getting opportunities without having to stress about it. Where the younger me, I'd be like, oh, I can't even do that. I gotta have a 9 to 5 because I can't risk not knowing what's gonna happen in the 7th month.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? But, I wanted to point out that we do have the yieldingwarrior.com, URL there with your book, and that is that, the place where people can get to you and get to your book? Or specifically for your book?
Yeah, so if they wanna reach me, they can go to justtheyieldingwarrior.com, and that'll be, where you can get access to my online program, my teacher training program, and then connect with me. If you wanna get a copy of the free book, go to the URL on the screen there, and, just pay for shipping and handling. We'll send you out a free copy of the book.
That's awesome. So you have, an actual, like, master class type of class or physical classes? How are your
Yeah.
classes set up?
So we have our academy here in Portland, Oregon. We're running 7 days a week. I've got about 500 active members here at the academy, so it's a pretty large school as far as meditation and martial arts centers go. And then I have my online program, which is more geared around just the meditative arts. Here at the academy, we have our meditation program. We do Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, we do Muay Thai, and then we also have Eskrima program, which is a Filipino martial art.
That's awesome. So, have you ever brought like your book on the road, like in a book tour, or gone to conventions for what you do?
No, I've never got on the road and went to bookstores and kind of did that. I don't even know if that's something I would ever want to do. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're just be comfortable in the way you're presenting your stuff, your material and your plans right now is it's working for you in the way that you're doing it. You didn't see
Yeah.
any.
Yeah, and I really enjoy getting out to meet people like you, and doing these podcasts has been kind of fun. The last 6 months, I think I've done 140 podcasts.
So
So
that's your effort to do
I've
that.
been pretty busy with that, and so that's a way that I'm kind of getting the message out there.
Well, it's a cool way. And as a podcaster, I do appreciate folks like yourself wanting to come out on these shows to present. And that's what we do here. I want to again thank you for being a guest on the Family Electric Coach podcast. We've been live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, and we will be on all the other platforms where you can listen to or watch a podcast by tomorrow. And I do appreciate the time you took here to talk about theyieldingwarrior.com and your book and your processes and your methodology. I think it's what you've talked about today can be very instructive to a lot of people that maybe didn't know what they needed. So I think this might be an eye opener, and I hope people check this out. And like the link is fully clickable in the podcast description on any channel that it's on. And I want to thank you again for being on the show.
Hey, thank you for having me.